Let me jump on. What we're going to cover in this deck is we're going to talk a little bit about securing the property. We're going to talk about 3 steps to highest and best offers, and I really like to spend a lot of time on that. One of the reasons I do that is the way that I work probate for my clients, I believe gives me a big advantage over the other agents in my market because I do things that the other agents don't necessarily do. And it's kind of a mix of cash offers, iBuyers, and MLS. And so most of the other agents in my market won't do that. They're all MLS or nothing. And so I'll talk about that. And then questions and answers. When I do this presentation with my probate personal representatives and attorneys, my goal is to try to get through the slide deck in about 20 or 30 minutes and then leave time for Q&A. But I also want you guys to ask questions as we go. So if anything comes up, just I want this to be a conversation, not just a bunch of words on the screen. And as I get better at this presentation, there will be some pictures and visuals on the screen also. All right. First, let me start here. Was there anything else that you expected to see tonight or anything else that you would like to see us cover in this presentation?
Well, you are on the highest and best offers, contrasting a cash as is offer from an investor versus putting it on the MLS and cleaning it up, right?
I'm going to surprise you with that, Bernie.
Okay.
I do both. That's how I get the highest and best offers.
Right. I'd like to be able to do both. And I don't know much about the wholesaling of property, so I find anything useful there.
Awesome. All right. So just a little bit about.
Go
ahead, Tracy.
Sorry.
No,
I was just going to add maybe since you're talking to the personal representatives, adding in tips for handling the personal property in the home.
Oh, yep. That's a good one. Yes. And it's funny. I have a slide that touches on that, but I didn't mention it up front. So that's a great.
Rene, it may be asking too much. If you have any slide which talks about the timeline of the probate,
yeah,
bring up that slide.
Yep.
What are the milestones to look into?
So that's a really good point. When I did my first one, I talked about the timeline in the 4 phases. And on this presentation, I started with the assumption that I'm talking to a personal representative who's already filed with the court. And it's funny that you said that too, because I was going back and forth on whether I should include a timeline in there. And in this slide, I didn't, but I will on my next one, and I can speak to it as we go as well. So that's a great suggestion as well. Okay, a little bit about me. My name is Reen. Sounds like green. I am a probate real estate agent with eXp Realty, and I am the founder of Probate Help Desk on Facebook and YouTube. I am based out of Minnesota, and I serve families across the United States. And as always, the legal disclaimer, I am not an attorney. I do not give legal advice. I work with a lot of great attorneys. I've learned a lot working with fantastic attorneys, but I'm not one, and I do not give legal advice. One of the other things I'll mention to all of you as you start to get into this, if you haven't had this happen already, especially if you're working with someone who is pro se or going through probate without an attorney, I'll tell them every time we talk, I'm not an attorney. I don't give legal advice, and they'll keep asking me legal questions. They'll want me to tell them how to fill out the forms. It's amazing how many people will ask for legal advice. So it's kind of hard to thread that needle. So I just make sure to let people know I'm speaking from my own experience, my experience as a personal representative. I've been a personal representative. My first time was when my father passed away, and I had to sell our family home that had been in our home for 3 generations. And then my attorney hired me to be a personal representative after I said I would never, ever do it again. And so he kind of got the ball rolling. Now my attorney that I hired hires me for some of our cases. I've been a PR twice. I've been a special administrator once, and then I've helped a lot of other families through the probate process. But I am not an attorney, and I'm not giving legal advice. So that's a little bit about me. What I'm going to do now, I already mentioned that my assumption is that the people attending this webinar have already filed for probate. That's how they heard about me, and that's why they're here. But this is something, Yogesh, that I recommend in the pre-probate phase. I put it in the slide deck, though, because it's really important. Bill talks about it a lot. Chad used to talk about it quite a bit. Every seminar I've attended, they always talk about this, and it still amazes me how many people miss this. So I put this in here, even though it's something the personal representative should have already done. So securing the property, before we do anything else, I want families to go back and secure the property. And the very first thing I recommend to families going through probate is change the locks. And the reason I say this is every single probate case that I have done, people show up with keys to the house. They show up, the neighbors show up with keys, family members show up with keys. I had one where all of her neighbors had keys. She had a lady that she worked with who had keys. The person who was delivering Meals on Wheels had keys. The person who came over to help her with her physical therapy had keys. The attorney had keys. Everybody had keys to the house except for me. Everybody had keys. And sometimes I would be over at the house working and people would just show up and let themselves in. And so I recommend to families right away, change the locks. I also had a listing where there was a person who passed away, and her brother was the personal representative. He said that there was no one, he had the only set of keys. Later, after we had closed on the house, and I was talking to the agent who represented the buyers, and we were talking about some of the neighbors, and she asked me if it was the neighbor that she had met. And I said, "What do you mean?" And and I'm like, "Yep, that's the neighbor. But how did you meet him?" And she said, "Oh, when we showed up for our appointment, he was in the living room and he showed us around the house." And I went back and I talked to the neighbor and I found out that what he was doing is he was trying to help out. And when a car would pull up in front and he would see it coming, he would let himself in the back. And when the agents would come in with their clients, he was there to greet them, and he was giving tours of the house and judging all the potential neighbors and deciding if he liked them and if he wanted. And I couldn't believe it. I've never had that happen before. But this guy, he had keys and he would just let himself whenever he wanted. And so I really recommend change the locks. Next is confirming insurance coverage. This is a big miss, but a lot of times when the person who lives in the home dies and the house is vacant, a lot of insurance policies do not cover the house any longer. They have a loophole in the policy that says the house is not covered if it's vacant or if the past owner has passed away. And when you talk to the personal representatives, they will tell you that the house is covered. Maybe they're still making payments through escrow or whatever. But they think because they're making insurance payments that their house is covered. And nowadays with the squatters and the people who go in to remove the copper pipes and all of that other good stuff, and the house typically is one of the largest assets in the estate. I always tell the personal representatives just to confirm that the house is covered. It's also important because later on, if we decide to put the house on an MLS, especially in as-is condition, if something happens in that house, I want to make sure that the family's covered, or at least they understand the risk before they make that decision. So most families I work with do not buy the vacant. It's called the vacant policy. Most of them do not buy it. I bought it on a couple of the cases that I worked on, but I always want to make sure that they know about it so they understand the risks that they are taking. And Yogesh, this is one of the things that I believe sets me apart from the other agents in my market is I'm not just trying to sell the house for the most money. I'm really trying to help the families explore their options and get through probate with the least amount of stress and the most money. But along the way, I want them to understand the risks and some of the impacts of their decisions. And that's something that a lot of the other agents in my market don't do. And Chad always used to say that's low hanging fruit. Like no other agent's going to talk about insurance. And they're always surprised to hear about it. And then last is I typically bring out no trespassing signs the first time I go out to the house. I have the personal representatives put the sign up someplace inside the house and then take a photo of it. And one of the reasons we do that in my market is because if we do end up with squatters in the house, if there aren't any signs on the property, the sheriff likely won't do anything about it. I know it's an odd thing, but if there are no trespassing signs on the property and the personal representative shows that they're personal representative and the person there is trespassing, then a lot of times the sheriff will remove them. But I've also had cases where there were no signs and the sheriff wouldn't remove the person in the house because they weren't trespassing, and the eviction courts wouldn't do anything because there was no lease agreement. And so the squatters were able to stay in the house indefinitely. And I had one case where the squatter was the contract paralegal from the attorney's office. She moved into the house. She never filed the paperwork. She just moved in. They went out and found a realtor who didn't know anything about probate, and they wrote up the purchase agreement, no lease, and she lived in that house last time I heard, because we never got her out, actually, I should tell you that. I suggested that the personal representative just offer them cash for keys, and personal representative, last thing she wanted to do was pay this person that lived in the house and sucked all the money out of their estate. And so they refused to pay this lady, and the lady lived in there for years. And the last time I checked, she was still living there. So I I put up the signs, if for no other reason, just to make it easier dealing with the sheriff and possibly the courts if we get there. One other thing, the squatters sometimes can be family members. So a lot of times people in the family might think it's a good idea to have someone in the family just live in the house to keep it safe, but they don't have any understanding or any lease, any written agreement. And again, because there's no lease and this person in the family, it's hard to get them evicted. So if they are, as personal representative, if they are going to let someone live in the house and stay there, I recommend they have at least some kind of written agreement and maybe collect a $5 or $10 rent, something just so there's some consideration so that if they have to go back and evict later on, it's easier. And no one thinks they're going to have to go back and kick their family members out, but it happens a lot. Tracy, we had one when I was probating my dad's house. The next door neighbors were probating their house. Their dad died the same time as our dad. They were friends growing up. And the personal representative wouldn't leave the house. So he was just gonna stay in there indefinitely. And the other two siblings had to go to court, have him removed as personal representative, and then have him evicted from the house.
I have a
So,
similar case right now.
yeah.
One of the beneficiaries won't leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, it's hard. And it's even worse when you have a beneficiary who has lived in the house and they think they're entitled, right? Like their name's not on the deed. They have siblings that are going to inherit part of the house and they can't understand why they're getting kicked. In fact, you see it in my Facebook group all the time. I've lived here my whole life and now my brother wants to kick me out of the house. Well, whose name is on the deed? Oh, my grandparents. It's
Right.
like, I let someone else deal with those in the group. All right. Yogesh, are there any surprises here for you?
Well, Reen, do you have a recommendation on putting in a video surveillance webcam with kind of coming to your phone as a security alert that something's happening?
That's a good idea. I haven't done that. I have not done that. But what I have done is if there are neighbors because there's always neighbors at these places that are keeping an eye on the
Yeah.
house. So a lot of times I'll talk to the neighbors and make sure they have my phone number.
Okay.
Or sometimes they
That's
just
even
find it.
better.
Yeah, the neighbors always know what's going on. I just don't like it when they have keys. But
Well,
I have not done the security camera yet. That's has anyone else tried that? Tracy, have you tried that?
But that's
No, but that's a good
really-
idea.
yeah, that's really a good idea. The only thing which gives me technically that more or less every camera needs either DVR or the Wi-Fi, and typically these houses where nobody is living, we don't have an internet or those things. So we may have to install something costly thing with the DVR things also, $300,000-$400,000 kind of thing.
Well, I'm even wondering, like in Minnesota, a lot of the hunters in Minnesota use these things called trail cams, where they can just sit out there independently and they go on and off, and then they come by and they download it onto their phone or onto their computer. Even
Okay.
something like that, we might be able to.
Oh yeah,
That's a good
Yeah,
idea,
you need
Bernie.
something quick and inexpensive that's not a long-term investment.
right.
Absolutely. But once the squatters are in, they're hard to get out of there. And Tracy, for my YouTube channel, I was thinking of getting our local sheriff to come on and just talk about squatters and how to remove them.
Good idea.
Reen, I particularly like your point about the person that died there may have been the parent of one of the heirs that might be living there still. So that's even harder because of the fact it was their home.
Right.
And how do you, as a personal representative, let's say a sibling of that person, tell them they've got to move out?
Well, one of the things that I do, and the reason I do this is because when I was personal representative, I had a lot of difficulty with different people in my family. So I learned some of this the hard way. But one of the things that I do, which my attorney recommended to me, and I still do it with all my clients, is as soon as we work with the personal representative and develop a plan for liquidating or whatever they're going to do with the house, a lot of times they're going to sell it. I make sure they communicate to the entire family, let them know the house is going to be sold. And if there's anybody in the family that wants to match our highest and best offer, we'll accept it, but they have to get approved now, right? They can't wait 3 months or 6 months. Like if they're really serious, they want to buy the house or keep it in the family, we'll sell it to them at I will let them match any offer that comes in because they're family, but they have to get pre-qualified right away. We're not going to wait. And so once you let those family members who are in the house know that they have the option to buy it, and here's the timeline, you'd be amazed. And even with the kind of the griping, right? Like someone wants to take the cash offer and a personal representative wants to take the cash offer and be done, but someone else in the family's convinced they could get 30% more if they put it on the MLS, and they fight and they fight. I just tell those people, hey, if they think the house is worth 500,000 and you believe it's worth 300,000, sell it to them for the 300,000 minus their inheritance. Then you get the money you want for the estate. They get the house at what they think is a bargain basement price, and everybody's happy.
Yeah.
And they go away really fast when you start talking about them buying the house.
But would you be willing to write an offer for that heir who wants to match the highest and best offer and represent them as a dual agent?
In Minnesota, I can either represent them as a dual agent, or we also have another thing called facilitator, where I facilitate a transaction and I don't represent either party. So we have a few different options in Minnesota. And when I talk later about working with the cash buyer, sometimes I don't represent the seller. Sometimes I just facilitate the transaction, and that's one of the ways I can keep it off the MLS.
Okay.
So, but I mean, I would do I think, as you know, like we talked about earlier, my goal is to help these families get through probate. And for me, a big part of this process is also the people and the relationships. And I know that one of the things that is very pressing for the personal representative is those personal relationships. Either they're getting hammered by someone in the family and they're angry, or sometimes they want to preserve the relationship. So whatever it is, I try to go beyond the sale of the home and do whatever I can to help that family get through this difficult time. So yeah, if someone in the family wants to buy it, keep it in the family, great, but get the checkbook out. All right, so let's talk about some of the options for selling, and then we'll get into my 3 steps. And part of the reason I want to talk about this first is because I like to get the family to really understand their options and think about what they're going to do, because that dictates the other steps that we are going to take along the way. So the options for selling that I usually present to people, number 1 are the cash buyers. And number 2 would be the iBuyers. I'll talk about the difference in just a second. Number 3 would be selling on the MLS as is. This is my sweet spot right here, and it's probably the most overlooked option in my market. Almost none of the other realtors will do this. I don't know why. It's easy. Well, I don't want to say it's easy money, but a lot of times when I start putting together the net sheets, I can show the family how they can net more by selling on the MLS as is. Sometimes even they can even net more money than if they repaired the property and sold it for top dollar. They never believe me until I show them the numbers, and then they're like, "Wow, I didn't get it." And then number 4, this is my least favorite option, is putting it on the MLS with updates, and this is the one that most people are trained to do, right? So most of your real estate agents are going to really encourage them to fix it up and put it on the MLS. I've even had some families and some clients that I've had where the agent will come out, they'll see what's happening in the house, and they'll say, all right, well, here's a checklist, do all this stuff and give me a call and we'll list it. And I've picked up a lot of clients because other agents have done that. So I don't like that option. One of the other reasons I don't like that option is for legal reasons. So when we talk about working with the attorneys, and a lot of the attorneys that I work with in my market, they don't want the personal representative to have to disclose material issues on the disclosure. And they also want to use what's called the waiver of liability to protect the personal representative and the estate. And as soon as you start fixing up the house, it makes it a lot harder for that attorney to justify the waiver of liability, right? So you start painting and you discover mold, you can't say you didn't know about it, right? So a lot of the attorneys I work with love it, love our approach as far as protecting the estate and the personal representatives from liability, even though the PRs typically aren't even thinking about that. So again, that's another thing that can set us apart. The other thing is when you're dealing with the cash buyers, Bernie, I think you mentioned wholesalers earlier. I put the cash buyers into a couple of categories. One of them would be wholesalers, and the wholesalers by definition are people who want to get the house under contract and then make their money by selling the contract, right? So they have no intention of buying the house, and most of the personal representatives don't even know that this is an issue. They get a big stack of letters and postcards in the mail. And in my market, they might get about 50 or 100 postcards, but there's only probably a dozen cash buyers, and the rest of them are all wholesalers out there trying to get the house under contract so they can sell it to the cash buyer. And so what they will do is they will get the house under, sometimes they'll bid higher than the other offers because they're not buying the house anyway. And they'll ask for a 30-day inspection period. They'll write things in a contract like they need to be able to go through the house with their contractors who are really the buyers. And they'll put down as little earnest money as possible, sometimes no earnest money at all. And they'll have a ton of contingencies in there. And the reason is, and they'll have a clause in there that says, and or assign, they're going to assign the contract to somebody. Well, then all they're going to do is spend the next 30 days bringing people through the house just like a real estate agent, except if none of those buyers buy because they weren't very good with their numbers and their estimates, then they just let it go, and the family gets to keep the $10 or $100 in earnest money, and they have to start all over again. And so I always tell my buyers, you don't really need me if you're going with a reputable cash buyer, but I can sure help you save a lot of time and money by filtering out the bad ones and make sure that you're working with a good one. iBuyers, those are like in Minnesota, I think the only one we have right now would be Open Door. And with them, a lot of families think they're just going to go right to the iBuyer, but the challenge is that the iBuyer's buy box doesn't include every home, and sometimes the probate properties are too old or not in good enough condition for an iBuyer to purchase them. And so the family will make an assumption. I've got the postcard, I've got a buyer, we're good to go, or we're going to sell the Open Door. They start working through the probate process, so they get a little bit further down the road, and then they find out that they don't have a legitimate deal, or the iBuyer falls through, or the cash buyer wasn't legitimate, and then they have to go back and start all over again. So that's kind of a tough situation. MLS as is, I'll talk about that more in a minute, and I already talked about, I feel like I did that slide twice. What questions or comments do you guys have about some of these options?
Well, Rena, I have a question about separating the wholesaler from the legitimate cash buyer. Do you ask them for proof of funds that they could buy it cash directly? Is that one way to?
The reason, okay, that's the right thing to do, but the reason why it doesn't always work is because they join these groups on the internet, and they can just print off a letter online that says that they have secure funds. A lot of times it's from a bank that you've never even heard of before. For me,
I'm going to an REAI meeting next month in my local county. I haven't done that before, so I'm going to meet some real investors there. It's probably best just to deal with the smaller group of known buyers than putting it out on a website.
Well, there's a couple things you could do, but the REIA, I'm glad you brought that up, Ernie. That's the number one place that so in Minnesota, in our REIA, I think we have something like 1,500 members. It's almost all the cash buyers in the local area. They're all in that one group, and we meet we meet the first Tuesday of every month. And so I never miss a meeting. I go there, they talk about their formulas, they talk about creative financing, you get to know who the hard money lenders are, you get to know who the cash buyers are, the rehabbers, the landlords, like you meet everybody. And at ours, they have a list up at the wall, and I think the one in Arizona has this too, so I think most of them probably do this. You just go over there and you say, hey, I need to add cash buyers to my cash buyer list. You put down your phone number, or Tracy with EXP, we have KV Core, you can do the smart number. You put it up there, and the cash buyers just subscribe to your list, and within one meeting, you can walk out of there with at least 5 to 10 legitimate cash buyers. And so I highly recommend that. Those are also people, Bernie, that are sending out the letters and postcards to the other probate people. So it's just nice to know who they are.
Right. Thank you.
Great suggestion.
And I find as far as this list goes, a lot of times for me, the properties, the best option is something between the MLS as is and MLS with updates. Just at the very least, getting the property cleaned out of all of the personal items, cleaning it, which can be a big deal.
Yep, you are correct. And I 100% agree with you. And I had one time where the family wanted me to put it on the MLS as is, and they would not clean anything out until after they accepted an offer. And I couldn't get them to change their mind, so we did it. And we had 30 showings on the property. 29 people absolutely hated it and told me I should lose my license. And one of them absolutely loved it and ended up buying it. And we were so lucky, Tracy.
Doing a happy dance. Yeah.
Well, and then my clients were trying to haggle on price, and we were only $1,000 away.
Oh.
And there were 4 siblings, and they were $1,000 away, so it was like $250 per sibling. I'm like, guys, you're gonna lose. Like, have you not been reading the reviews from the MLS? Like, that's not like, we want to get this one under contract and do this, So they finally did it, but oh man, I thought we were gonna lose that one. I really did. But it happened. In fact, you know what they did in that one, Tracy? This actually ended up working out to their advantage. When the buyers were going through the house, they told the buyers to put a piece of blue tape on any personal property that they wanted to keep. And so the buyers went through and they just started putting tape all over stuff. And they felt like it was a bonus that the sellers were including this. And then the sellers, when they did their clean out, they just removed all the stuff that didn't have the blue stickers on it. So they didn't even have to take everything out of the house at that point.
Gotcha.
So that part worked out really well.
Reen, I have
Mhm.
a question about cash buyers. Do you sign a listing agreement with the PR when you're dealing with a cash purchase, or do you try to get that money from the buyer?
It
Your
depends.
commission.
So I know when Bill talks about how it depends, it really does depend. If I can get them to sign a listing agreement, I will sign the listing agreement. And I just switched brokers, so I'm not sure what my new broker has to say about this, but with an our MLS, if we sign a listing agreement, we have to put it on the MLS within 48 hours or do a withhold, right? We have to do withhold paperwork.
Right.
So sometimes I don't want to go through that. So I might just sign a facilitator agreement, especially if I don't think it's going to do well on the MLS or if I really feel like they're going toward the cash offer, I might just do the facilitator agreement. That'll give me everything I need to market it to my cash buyers and the iBuyers. And in a situation like that, then I would send it out to my cash buyers who are willing to pay my fee, because I have cash buyers they'll just pay me to bring them deals. And
Right.
so if I have a family that's really reluctant to pay a commission or, um, whatever tight situation, then I'll just tell them if I bring them a buyer off my list, my buyers will pay the same thing. The iBuyers, Open Door will pay me a 1% fee, even if I don't do anything else, right? So if they're not going to pay any additional fees, then I just market it to the people on my list that'll pay my fees. And sometimes they are under contract with the listing agreement, and sometimes they're not. You do have to be careful marketing the property if it's not under contract. So I have to kind of see where the buyer's at. If there's no way they're going to sign an agreement with me and they just want to know what the cash price is going to be, I'm pretty good at knowing what my buyers are willing to pay. I know the formula. I learned it at the RIA. And if I give them that number and it's in the ballpark, then I'll shoot a video and I'll just send it off to that cash buyer, and I'll just say, hey, I've got this one out in Minnetonka. It's not on the market yet. I think it'll probably be, a $200,000 cash deal. Does it look like something you'd be interested in? And they just tell me. So
A facilitator agreement, do you find that form somewhere?
yeah, that's right. That's one of the forms that we have in our MLS.
Oh,
So yeah. And I don't think every state calls it a facilitator. I can't remember what the name of it is outside of Minnesota, but in Minnesota they call it a facilitator agreement, where I'm bringing a buyer and seller together, but I'm not representing either one of them.
I think we could just use one of our commission agreements now. We're getting all new forms, of course, with the NAR settlement. And, that I think might work, just having an agreement with the buyer for a commission agreement.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I go back and forth all the time because sometimes you go through a little run where everybody just wants your cash number and then they go do something else. And that's one of the reasons why Bill is encouraging me to do more online, so that I build a stronger relationship with them before we get to that point, right? Otherwise, I'm just like every other agent that walks through the door. Um, so there are some days I'll say, well, I'm not going to do anything unless they sign, and then there are other days where I'm like, oh man, I think we can make that work and we can do it fast. And so I just kind of play it by ear.
Good. Thank you.
That's the thing with probate is every family and every house has a unique fingerprint.
Yeah.
You can't, they are not one size fits all. So it takes a little bit of a different skill set to really do it right.
Right. Exactly.
And Tracy, you know that in California here, we have granted in the probate either full authority or limited authority. With limited authority, the court has to, approve and allow for overbidding. So that complicates, I would imagine, a cash buyer's deal anyway. Right.
You know what's interesting about that, and I hope you don't mind, Green, if I don't want to get you too off topic, but yeah, so here in my county, I went and visited the probate clerk, and I asked her about that, and she said in all the years that she's worked there, she's never once seen someone show up to court to do an outbid on a limited authority. So, and I know that scares away a lot of investors. So I'm now taking the message to my local investors like, hey, you don't have to be afraid of those deals. The chances of someone showing up at court to outbid you are pretty slim.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know.
Yeah. So it's worth asking your probate clerk.
Oh, there you go.
And Tracy, if I may, we also have this concept that I've read about but haven't had any experience with, and that is the court-appointed appraiser who's called a referee. Yeah. And that's not someone that we choose or anyone else chooses. And then they do a drive-by, kind of a broker price opinion drive-by. And it's good for us to get inside the house to show how much trouble the home is in, if it is, before they set that price too high, because the court wants to see on a limited authority a final sales price that it's at least 90% of what the referee showed was the appraised value based on a drive-by only.
And
Definitely.
Bernie, in Minnesota, our referees don't necessarily set the appraisal value, but they make sure that the price is fair, whatever that means. That's what they
Oh,
do.
That's
So
interesting.
well, one of the things that I do is when I'm doing one of these, I always try to get at least 3 offers, so that if the court asks how we came up with that, especially if we do it without an appraisal, I want to be able to justify the number that we came up with. And also I do that again because if there's someone in the family that's going to match the top offer, I want to make sure that we have at least 3 offers. So in Minnesota, if I make sure I have at least 3 offers and I can help justify why the PR accepted one, a lot of times the court here will accept it.
Good.
And then I've had the other side of it where we get some crazy appraisals and it's like, there's no way I can sell it for that much. I'm sorry. I'll try, but I don't think it's going to happen. So. All right, I'm going to jump onto this slide real quick here. And I just noticed I don't have a clock in my room. So how are we doing on time?
It's 5:45. Well,
5:45.
8:45 for you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let me try to go through this one really quick then. So this is a little comparison I put together to try to educate the families that I'm working with. So I like them to know that the cash buyers are going to come in about 60 to 70% of the after repair value. And do you guys both know what after repair value is? Yep, I see you now.
ARV.
ARV, yep. So 60 to 70% is going to be cash buyers, and they have some different formulas. So I'll tell, I'll either do my market analysis or I'll tell the family, you could go to Zillow or HomeBot or another tool and look at the number. And I know that's not the final number, but if 60 to 70% of that number doesn't work for you, then cash buyer might not be a good option for you. And so that's one way, because a lot of these people think that they're, when they get the postcard in the mail and it says things like, we'll pay a fair price and we'll close fast and no commissions and all that, they think they're going to get, the market value, the full fair market value. But 60 to 70% is what the cash buyers are going to get. And some people will take it because it's a good deal for them. They don't have to make repairs. They don't have to pay commissions. Sometimes it's a great offer, but I think I heard a stat the other day that something like I think it was at the RIA, they told us only 5% of the transactions in our market are cash buyers and the rest are all on the MLS. So even though people are wanting those cash offers, they're still going a traditional option most of the time. They could close fast. There's no commissions, very limited cleaning. A lot of times they'll tell you to just take what you want and leave the rest. No repairs. The challenge here is that you have to meet the cash buyer's buy box. So that's the criteria that they will accept. Some will only buy newer homes. Some will only buy full rehabs. Others want buy and hold. So it has to be in certain condition. And then I already mentioned earlier about the wholesalers. So one of the ways that I can save my personal representatives, my families, a lot of time, I know which cash buyers are right for their home, right? They have a stack of 50 and they think they have 50 buyers, but when they start going through it, they might find out that only a handful of those are really interested in the home. They don't know which ones pay the most. They don't know any of that stuff. The other thing I do, if I lose out on a deal to a cash buyer, I find out who it was and I add them to my list. So they become part of my team if they beat me on deals. iBuyers, that would be something like I don't think Zillow has an iBuyer anymore, iBuyer service, but Open Door does. They're usually around 70 to 80% of the after repair value. They'll close sometimes in 14 days from the time the offer is accepted. They're also very flexible, so they'll let people choose their own closing dates. They do charge commission and fees, and you do have to do a certain amount of clean out if you're going to sell to an iBuyer. And you don't have to make repairs, but they will deduct them from the price, similar to a cash buyer. Again, they have a specific buy box. So in our market, Open Door advertises to all of these personal representatives and all these families. But then if they are in a certain zip code or their house is a certain age or there's a well or a septic or all these other conditions, they won't buy it. And the family doesn't find out until they've already spent a lot of time assuming they had a buyer and they really didn't.
That time is money.
Absolutely. And then, like I said, they'll reduce for repairs.
Ray, what about those houses that has no access?
No access, like they won't let, no one can get in to look at it?
Yes. For example, I'm in a situation right now. I have a probate case, but one of the siblings is the actual tenant of the house.
Yep.
And the other two siblings are like, we'll buy you out. He doesn't want to be buyed out. So currently, I took the listing, but there is absolutely no access, no contingencies, no inspection, no appraisal, and we
Sure.
can't put a sign over there.
So first of all, what's your name and where are you from? What
My
market?
name is Tony. I'm from Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Okay. A lot of people don't like this answer, especially the personal representatives, but I recommend it all the time. You go down to
Mhm.
your local RIA meeting, you sell the house with the people in it. There are investors who will buy it and do the eviction later. Um, you can do that.
That part I know, but what I'm trying to ask is that I think they're doing this on purpose so that the siblings can buy it. So just because of that, it's like a $1.1 million house that I appraised. I mean, not appraised, that I did a comp, but I listed it for 860
Okay.
because we have no access. We don't know what
Oh,
it inside looks like, and obviously the buyer, whoever is going to buy it, they have no access either. So they have to do no contingency, no nothing. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're going to attract more of the cash buyers, but the whole purpose of doing this is not giving access, is for them to buy it themselves. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. Are they gonna be able to buy it and match your best offer, do you think?
Yes.
Okay. So is there a reason why the family doesn't want to, like, is it one of these things the family just doesn't want to do it then?
Yeah, one of the brothers doesn't want to sell it, but the court says it doesn't matter what you want to do. You have no money. You can't buy it yourself. So
Oh, buy it himself.
so we have to put it in the market. This house must be sold. So
It's not
Gotcha.
a family member buying it. It's not a family member buying it, correct?
it is. So it's like three siblings. Two siblings want to buy it, but the other sibling, whoever is residing inside the house right now, doesn't want to buy it. And is
Tony,
that
have you made friends with a good eviction attorney in LA?
to be honest with you, that's taking into consideration that it might be needing an eviction, and it's going to cost them. We're all in California, you know how evictions is over here, right? It's going to cost them approximately like $20,000 to $40,000 to get that person out. But the ruling was made already, so it doesn't matter that the guy is inside. That's why I'm trying to say that we appraised the property at almost $250,000 less. So I just want to know. I'm not live yet. I just want to know what to expect. You know what I'm saying? Am I going to attract more cash buyers or wholesalers, or I won't even have
Um,
that time? Maybe one of the siblings will write the offer and buy it once we go live. You know? So I
yeah.
just want to know what I should expect.
Well, with the siblings, I would get out in front of it. This is, I think I mentioned this before you jumped on. I like to give them option to buy right up front, and I tell them to get pre-qualified right away. And
Hmm.
sometimes if they're, if they subtract their part of the inheritance from the price of the house, sometimes they can qualify easily because they might already have, 50% equity or 20% equity or something like that in the house. So if there's a sibling that might be able to buy it, I would start working on them like immediately. You could talk to the sheriff to see if you could get them out, but it's going to be hard. We talked a little bit about that too. Family members who stay in the house. Um, there's no easy way to get them out. I usually will talk to the sheriff or encourage my sellers to just pay the person to move out. But when it's family, a lot of times they refuse to. They just don't want to pay people to move out of the house when they shouldn't be there in the first place. So, but if
Yeah,
they can stay in there, I was telling the story. I had a lady that stayed in the house for years, and
yeah.
last time I checked, she was still there. I don't. They couldn't get her out. They wouldn't pay her to move out, and she's just taking advantage of the situation. So it's not a. There's no easy answer on that one. I don't have a good
Yeah, I
answer
get it.
for it.
I
Uh,
guess once I go live, I'll get a better understanding of what to expect, what was not.
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't hurt you to have a conversation with the sheriff, but I don't know. I don't know if that's going to help because when is it a family member that's lived in there for a long time?
I guess so.
Yeah, so then
I
they'll say, look, I've got, all my utilities. I pay the utilities. I pay the tax. They'll do all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
all the evaluation and everything.
Mhm.
In what part of Los Angeles are you in?
I'm in Ventura. I'm in Encino.
Oh, you're in, yeah. In such a highly populated area, it's LA. Like you said, the sheriff is spread so thin.
Yeah, I know.
You'll be lucky just to get someone on the phone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What
Yep.
county are you in?
Ventura County.
Oh, you're in Ventura County,
Yeah.
so you're with Jose and everything.
Neighboring county.
Nice.
Yeah.
I would at least suggest cash for keys and see if you could pay them to move out. And then I would also, whichever family member wants to buy it, I would start working on getting them pre-qualified right away.
Got it. Got it. One more very important question. I don't know, you might know the answer for this. To not attract, on probate cases, to not attract wholesalers that they're going to bombard these people's email, not email address, obviously, their address, send out postcards, go and knock on their door and everything like that. Are we allowed to basically advertise a probate listing on all our social medias without saying that it's probate, but we list it as probate in the MLS? Because these wholesalers, not a lot of people, not a lot of times they have no access to MLS, right? So that they won't know. You know what I mean?
Yep. I would say,
Or since it's a probate, it must be advertised as probate.
well, in my market, we don't have to advertise it as a probate, but I usually
Okay.
I encourage the family to do it because I like to set the expectation of the buyers right up front. This is a probate deal. We're not going to pay for repairs. We're not going to, you can have your inspection, but if you're VA, FHA, we're not fixing everything, right? So that's part of my as is strategy, but I use it to my advantage. And I used to offer the buyer's agent a really nice commission, higher than all the other buyer's agents. But now with the new rules, I don't know if I can use that strategy anymore. But
Yeah.
I would literally just pay the buyer's agents to work with me, and I would let them know up front that it was a probate case. And most of the time, then they knew what they were dealing with. So
Yeah,
Also,
I see.
those wholesalers, they're getting that data from somewhere else. That's how they're sending postcards to their mailbox. They're paying
mhm.
there's data you can buy that as soon as someone files for a probate, you can get those leads. You don't have to have the MLS. There's multiple ways to get that. So I think the
Yeah,
best thing
no,
to do is to warn your clients upfront right away. Hey, you're going to get a ton of postcards from people offering to buy your house. Um, Here's what they are, and let me know if you have any questions. But I want to protect you.
One of the things that Bill Gross does, and I've heard of other agents doing this. I haven't done it yet, but I'd like to. If you know the family really well and you think they're going to go under contract with you, give them a big envelope and tell them to put all those postcards in the envelope, and you'll deal with them. And then you could go through later and find out who all those cash buyers are in your market and what kind of stuff they're sending out.
that's a good idea. And then maybe you can connect with them, and anytime that you have a deal, instead of just waiting for somebody to call you, you'll just put them
Right.
in your database, and you would call and offer them, hey, you know what? I just took a new listing. Are you aware of it, or are you still interested in investing? Or
Yep.
that's
Then
actually a good idea.
the family can just ignore them, throw them in your envelope, hand them to you, and now you've got a cash buyers list ready to go.
Yeah,
This is Bernie. I have another question. On your cash buyers, you say close in 7 to 14 days. Is
Yep.
that after court approval of the purchase agreement?
Oh yeah. So again, with this presentation, I'm assuming that the family has already filed for probate and the court has issued letters. And in Minnesota, if the court has issued letters, the personal representative has authority to sell unless court approval is required, right? So for us, once the personal representative has the letters, they can sell. Now, the problem in Minnesota is most sellers don't realize that. They're waiting for their attorney to do something, and and I'm like, you got your letters. You could sell right now if you want to. And the really good cash buyers know that too. But yeah, so 7 to 14 days once they have their letters and they've decided they want to sell, and if they go out and find a cash buyer and the cash buyer says, yep, we could get it through title company in the next 7 days and we'll hand you a check. Yeah, they could do it here.
Can I ask Tracy, in California, don't we also still need, even on a full approval, to get the court to rubber stamp the deal?
Yes. Yeah.
So we can't close without, and their calendars are quite long, I understand.
I think it depends on what county you're in. Here in Ventura County, it's only a couple of weeks, but
Okay.
they do get sign off from all of the beneficiaries, and the judge does have to rubber stamp the sale price.
Yeah. Yeah, California, we have a lot more complexity, I believe, when I hear about most states.
Well, the nice thing is, I can't remember if it was Bill or Casey I heard say this today, when you learn what those exceptions are, that's going to really set you apart from all the other agents that you're competing. Because a lot of agents, even if I tell the story, there's one agent in my market that does more probate deals than I do. I'm gaining on her, but she still does more than I do. And she sends out letters that have inaccurate information on, right? Like she'll send these checklists and timelines and all, and it has information that is not accurate. And nobody else knows. Nobody knows.
Wow.
And so I don't know.
The attorney should know.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know how much I don't know. The attorneys aren't looking at those letters.
Yeah.
So,
No, they don't have time for that.
absolutely. All right, I'm going to go through these last couple really quick. So as is, we're about 80 to 90% of the after repair value. Closing, the reason I said 30 to 60 days, sometimes we can close sooner. It really just depends on the buyer and the title company. But I tell the families they're probably looking at about 30 days. you are paying commissions and fees. However, when I do the net sheets, I do a net sheet for each one of these scenarios. So I'll do a net sheet for cash buyer, net sheet for iBuyer, net sheet for as is, and a net sheet for with updates. And I do that so that there's always someone in the family that prefers one option over the other. So I put together a net sheet for all of them, and I say, look, if you go with this option, you're going to walk away with the most money. And typically for me, it's the as is on the MLS for a variety of reasons. There is some moderate cleaning needed. The way I do it, I encourage them not to make repairs. This does limit our interactions with FHA and VA buyers. So typically our buyer here is going to be a conventional buyer. And this allows us to maintain liability waivers that the attorneys love, which most of the other agents in my market never do. Well, I don't know if they do them or not, but I've never heard any of them talk about them. And then with updates, that's where you're investing in the property, you're getting it up to, full fair market value. The reason I said 60 days plus, because one of the things a lot of families forget about, and I work it into the net sheets, is if you're going to do a full rehab, which most of these require, you're going to have to find contractors, which aren't easy. And I know because I work with them at the RIA. And if you do get on their calendar, you're going to have to hope they show up. You're going to have to hope they finish the job. You're going to be paying holding costs and all these other things. So if someone really, really wants to do the updates and sell the property, I ask them to talk to their attorney about just transferring the property into their own name so they can finish probate and then do whatever they want with the house later. But I don't encourage them to do the full updates during probate. It's adding another headache on top of a headache.
And in this market, you just don't know, because now you're risking the market coming down, right? You could take 60 to 90 days or more, or 6 months to do this full rehab. And by the time it's done, the market could have shifted downward. It's really risky.
Yep. And you're paying commission fees, contractor fees, holding costs, ton of cleaning, significant repairs, maybe a full rehab. It does open it up so you can sell to all the buyers, but then you also start to lose your liability personally and with the estate. And then this is where the attorneys, right? We talk about the attorneys that don't like working with the traditional realtors. Well, if the realtor is telling the family, rehab the house, you'll get, $1 million instead of 750 or whatever the numbers are. And the attorney's like, no, we just want to close this and be done with it. And we're opening ourselves up to liability. And we talked earlier, the house isn't insured and maybe a contractor gets hurt. And there's all these, like, just, buy the house yourself and fix it up later, or transfer the title and fix it up outside of probate. But I hate that option. A lot of people do it.
Yeah.
A lot of people do it.
A lot of people do it because they see the highest sales price.
Correct. Absolutely.
Tracy said before, something between as is and updates is deep cleaning, some landscaping, just some things to make it attractive for the showings, I think goes a long way. That's an investment I would always recommend. Mm-hmm. Such a seller's market and prices are still going up in many areas. So, it's really worth competing with a few other homes that are on the market.
Well,
sorry.
Go ahead, Tracy, go ahead.
I think, just based on my experience, I still think it depends on the property. I've had probate properties that had mold, like visible mold on the walls.
Yeah.
And, liability waiver or no, you go in there and you just paint over those. You're opening up yourself for trouble. So there are certain homes you just should leave alone, or do the full rehab, which means you pull out the drywall and everything.
Well, and Tracy, those are the ones where I will then ask the family, like, maybe a cash buyer is best in this situation, right? Like, cash buyers are really appropriate for certain situations.
And certain markets too. Like our market is so hot right now, even though things are starting to take a downturn, unless you get into the upper, luxury market, in just a regular family home, the market is so hot that you're going to have no shortage of buyers, even in a home that's needs a full gut.
Yep.
So here, it's still better to do it MLS as is, but that could change depending on how the market changes.
It's the same for us as well. So, Bernie, what I do then is my approach, again, what sets me apart from the other agents is I do a combination or a hybrid. I do all three: cash buyer, iBuyer, and MLS as is if they're not happy with the cash buyer, iBuyer prices. And then I can always go back to my cash buyers, right? So you see some agents offer the guaranteed sales program. We can always go back to my cash buyers if we need to, but we can use it as a baseline. But the reason I like them to think about this up front is because it's going to determine how much cleaning and how much repair work we do on the property. Like, they're being told right now that they should do the painting, they should do the bathrooms, maybe put in some new whatever. And I'm telling them and showing them numbers to say, do any of these numbers look good to you right now? Because we can make this happen, right? And if no, and you want to spend some extra time dealing with, because they're not just selling a house, they're dealing with their family who's fighting with them while they're going through probate. They're going to court dates. They go to a court date and their sister doesn't show up. Their cousin wants to have a garage sale, but they don't do it, right? They're dealing with a million different things more than just selling a house. And some of them just want to be done. And so I always give them that option. If you want to be done, we could be done in 7 to 14 days.
I was thinking on a home that's not the obvious teardown like Tracy was talking about with mold, but if it looks reasonable, having a pest and a home inspection done is usually done to help buyers decide on what they want to bid. You wouldn't
Yeah.
do that?
No, I don't. I literally, so all the things they tell you not to do in realtor school. I take a sign, I put it up in the yard. I take my own pictures. I write on the MLS that it's as is. And then I try to price it low to get a bidding war going, because you get these guys using escalation clauses and you get up to 80 to 90% of the ARV really fast without touching a thing. I had
Okay.
one where the paramedics had to break down the door to get into the house, and the seller boarded up the door. And I even thought he should replace the door on that one. He still wouldn't do it, and we still ended up getting almost full market value for that house.
Well,
No,
our
I don't
market
ever.
price is $1 million, and many of these will be well over $1 million.
Mhm.
And given that any buyer to really pay, every home is sold as is, by the way, contractually as is. Every home is sold as is, but the ones that are in better shape do command much higher offers, and so
Right.
giving
Right.
an inspection report and a pest report is almost standard these days for any MLS sale. So what is really the downside of doing that?
Well, where do you draw the line, right? Are you going to do another inspection after that? Are you going to make the repairs? Are you going to?
No, we don't have to make repairs. It's really giving the buyer a heads up on the condition of this house,
Yeah,
and then they have less contingencies or no contingency.
yeah, but now you might have just lost your liability for the estate, your waiver liability.
Right. Now you know what's going on and you have to disclose it.
Yeah.
Well, we would disclose the report, yes, but we don't have to have any transfer disclosure statement or property questionnaire. Those things are not required in California law on a probate.
Yeah.
I don't, I disagree with that. I mean, I know it's not required. You're right. I don't think it's absolutely required. However, I take a different approach. For me, and you may all disagree with me on this, but for me, if my seller, if the personal representative knows the house, maybe it's the house they grew up in, maybe they, lived in town, so they visited their parents a lot and they're familiar with the house, they helped maintain the house, even though technically they could get a waiver, in reality, they know what's going on with that house. And so to protect them, I have them fill out disclosures anyway. It's
Okay.
better to disclose than to have a problem down the road. If they live out of state, they have no idea, they've never set foot in the house, or they haven't set foot in the house in 30 years, that's different. But if they do know the house, then all the way through filling it out, we make notes, not required to fill out the disclosure, but this is what they do know.
Okay.
And Bernie, we do have, in some of our cities here, we do have mandatory inspections where we have to do an inspection.
Right. A
But-
city inspection, we have those and they would be done. You have to give a natural hazards report and you have to do the lead-based paint if it's older than,
Mhm.
78.
Yep. But my philosophy, and this is just because this is the way my attorney taught me, my philosophy is just do the minimum amount necessary.
Right. Right.
But
Well, thank you for your
yeah.
answer.
And maybe next time we talk, I'll go through the net sheets and show you how we can get more money as is without making those repairs and inspections. But anyways, once we know what that is, we're going to clean accordingly, right? So for cleaning, I always encourage them to get whatever they're keeping, get it out of the house as soon as the attorney tells them that they can, so that it's not there. Then we go to the selling options. People like to do their garage sales. I usually recommend having an estate sale or an online auction. One house we had here in Minnesota, the house sold for, I think it was around 300,000. We did an online auction with the personal property and we brought him an extra 17,000 in just getting rid of the personal property. And that's nice because then we donated most of what was left. And by the time we got to discard, we didn't have to spend very much money on the clean out because we already did the selling and the donating. Donating is also good because they get the tax benefits on their estate, and also it can pass through to their personal, but I'm not a tax accountant. But donating as much as possible is good for a lot of these people, and then discard whatever's left, as I said. And we're only cleaning according to what we decided as far as our plan goes, right? So if we know we're taking a cash offer, they're just keeping what they want and selling the rest, or keeping what they want, selling it, and whatever. We keep it. I have them just keep it to a minimum. And then number two, I solicit the offer. So that's where I go to my cash buyers, my iBuyers, set the baseline price, and then most cases I end up putting it on the MLS as is. And we already talked about that. I'm sorry, I'm jumping through this. Did someone say something, Tracy?
Nope.
So just to kind of
You're good.
recap, what I tell them, what I encourage everybody to do is whether you're going to use a probate real estate agent or not, at least meet with one so that you understand all of these options, because most of the times we can provide the sellers with options that traditional realtors aren't even thinking about. If they decide to go down the cash buyer track, they're meeting one-on-one with every cash buyer whose only objective is to get the house at the lowest price possible. If they go with iBuyers, they're working one-on-one with the iBuyer. If they go with a traditional agent, they're being told to fix it up, put it on MLS. We, or at least I, like to give them multiple options and show them how they can save time and walk away with the most money, contrary to some of their common beliefs. So I tell them, meet with someone like me right away. Even if you don't plan to work with us, that's okay, but at least know what your options are. Analyze the situation, understand the options, come up with your approach, and then start cleaning and soliciting offers.